Sarah?
Thanks.
Tell me a story.
I don't know any.
You don't know any ghost stories.
One.
Okay. Let's hear it. Is it that scary? Okay, now you're starting to freak me out.
Once upon a time, there was a little girl who believed in fairy tales. She read them every night in an old book she got from the library. She used to pretend that she lived locked away in a high tower in a castle, but really she lived in a run-down home with her parents. One night, she came home and she found her father sitting alone in the kitchen. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sitting on the table, and a cigarette dangling from his lips. He tells her to come here, so she does. She can tell that something's wrong. He tells her that Mommy's gone. Mommy left, and she's probably never coming back. This makes her sad, but she's easily distracted from it when he starts to tell her a story about how he ran into an old neighbor lady, Mrs. Connor, at the supermarket. And she loved Mrs. Connor. He takes a drag from his cigarette and says, "Mrs. Connor was talking about you today. She told me all about how you're such a sweet little girl. Do you know how sweet of a little girl you are?" She's trying to hide her smile, but she can't. It's growing. She's blushing. She feels like a princess. And then suddenly she's pinned against the wall, her feet dangling and kicking as she's suspended in the air. He's holding her by her face. Her eyes widen with terror and confusion. She tries to scream, but she can't. He's looking at her, past her. And then he says in an evil, vicious voice, "Drop the act, darling. The world isn't sweet." And then he drops her. She lands with a thud on the floor. And that is the day the little girl died. But she keeps on growing, and her hair grows out, and her body swells up, and suddenly boys begin to notice her. When she starts to sleep with them, she hurts a lot of people, but she doesn't care, or maybe she does, but she likes it. She's hungry for it. She realizes even the act of love is an act of consummation. Late one night, she hears someone sobbing. She opens her eyes and she sees something at the foot of the bed. It reveals itself when she kneels down to it, and she realizes it's the little girl, her face buried in her hands. The little girl says, "How could you let this happen to me?" She wants to say, "I'm sorry. It wasn't me. I never meant for it to end up like this." But she can't. The next day, she looks into the mirror and she doesn't see a person. She sees a monster. Her teeth have become fangs. Her eyes, empty shells. Her hair, cascading branches with thorns. Sometimes, she has nightmares. She sees her father. But now it's not whiskey coming from his mouth. It's blood. His eyes are white and glassy. He smiles, taunting her. With a deep, distorted voice, he says, "Drop the act, darling." Looking back, she remembers all the people she hurt and left behind. The ghosts of her past. And sometimes, when the moon is full and the stars align, she can see the little girl. The girl who got dropped and never stopped falling. Gotcha.
Sarah?